Hey guys, it's Horror Free for All, better known as Goosebumps Completionist, and I hope you're doing well tonight. Welcome back to Goose Junkies and our special of sorts for episode 44 tonight. We're going to be looking at, in our humble opinion, as an expert panel on kids' horror and all things kids' horror, we're going to be looking at the top 5 scariest kids' horror episodes ever made. So strap in and enjoy the discussion that we're going to have tonight, everyone. As usual, I'm joined with my two co hosts and fellow good friends that I've made in kids' horror community out here. We have the Horrorlander and the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy, the Horror Lander. And today's question is, what is the scariest? What makes something scary? You have visceral horror, like the first time I saw my ex Felicia naked. It was truly a horrible sight. Then you have existential horror, which is the fact that Lawn Gnomes and Goosebumps got a sequel, despite Deadhouse never getting a sequel. These are things that can scare you to the very bone. But what makes something truly scary in kids' horror? Well, does it feel like a horror movie? Can it keep you scared throughout it? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, all of you guys, make sure you get your night lights, get your blankies, because these are the type of episodes that even as a grown man, as a grown woman, you might still look out for the dark corners of your room, making sure that nothing's lurking. Tune in, people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well said. What about you, Micah?
I'm doing great. Just crashing down from a very, very busy week last week. So definitely looking forward to kind of having things mellow back out again, kick things off with the podcast. Always great to do that.
I feel that, man. It's been a whirlwind of a year for 2026 so far. But I'm glad that we're all able to get on and record this podcast because this is a topic that I feel like is almost unventured territory because when we're covering kids' horror, mainly for this discussion, everyone, full transparency, we're not really going over all types of kids' horror. Or we're not really considering animated kids' horror at all. We're basically just looking at the big five that are commonly brought up. You know, you have Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, The Nightmare Room, The Haunting Hour, and Creeped Out. Those are like the 5 shows that we wanted to keep in contention. Yes, I'm well aware that shows like Dead Time Stories and Bone Chillers and Spooksville exist. But really, when it comes down to kids' horror and I guess the main mindset of kids' horror are stuff that resembles what Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps was doing in the 90s. So for this video, we kept shows similar to those shows, and they had to be basically live action, made with humans on camera, paid actors, paid production crew, and everything going to a film set, live on location, or on a soundstage somewhere where they built a set. Right, that was the criteria. So it's a tall order, especially when you're looking at these shows. And some shows have an extensive catalog of episodes, some shows are kind of short. But really, the fact that kids' horror in this, I guess, mindset of the genre, where it's anthological, standalone stories, the fact that these shows don't really add up to be that all that much is saddening, but it makes our job easier to let you know if you are new to kids horror or if you are somewhat familiar with kids horror but haven't watched an episode in maybe over a decade or 2 decades, pushing 3 decades possibly for some of you out there. These episodes, I think, adults and kids alike can come into and turn off the lights and all around their house and just have their eyes glued to the TV and get immersed and scared, right? Or at least the episodes will invoke you to feel the tension or evoke you to feel creeped out to a degree where you can kind of equate that to being scared. So we don't take this lightly. We put a lot of thought into this list. So all you naysayers out there saying these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. All right, look, we've basically watched all the shows at this point casually. All 3 of us combined. I know some of us still have quite a few episodes or a big chunk of episodes in certain shows, or maybe haven't even touched or hardly touched like one particular show like Creeped Out. But I have personally watched every episode from all five of those shows I brought up at least one time. And I can tell you from experience as an adult, and some of these shows I did watch as a kid, that these episodes I can say confidently I think are without a doubt the scariest. Whether we're talking about tone or how they go about conducting themselves in a way to evoke tension or whatnot, you can look at it however you want to slice it. I think these episodes really do capture what it's like to watch a horror movie. And that's, I guess, the mindset we all want to go into with this organized list here. Not necessarily in order of what we feel is the scariest, or least scariest to most scariest, but the ones that we wanted to bring to the table that evoke what it's like I said, what it's like to watch a horror movie, or these episodes have horror movie qualities to them. So that was our mindset going into it. And I think the list that we compiled, if you've seen the episodes in question, you will probably agree deserve to be on this list. And just to throw a monkey wrench out there, um, we did pick five on an official list, but we all decided to gather our own honorable mentions to start you off with, because these episodes we're going to bring up, we personally think deserve to also be in discussion for this list, but they just didn't make the top five, right? So we're going to get right into them because we have a lot of episodes to talk about. Some of these episodes were written for their respective shows. Some of these were written based off of original source material. So just know that if there are some episodes based off some source material, we're not saying that necessarily the episode is better than the source material. We're just saying that for an episode standard, it still holds its own very well. So whoever wants to start with their honorable mention, I'll leave the floor open. Let's get right into it and start talking about some scariest kids horror episodes.
Well, I guess I can go first. And the reason I'll go first is because, ironically, we're talking about the scariest episodes. And what more fitting to be one of the scariest episodes than one that talks about fear and phobias itself? That is, Fear Never Knocks from the Haunting Hour. This episode has always been one of the scariest episodes, in my opinion, and one of the greatest concepts made for a kids' horror episode. My only complaint is I wish it was longer, which is a good complaint because it means that I want it more. This one, without going into too much detail, is basically about a group of kids. You have a pair of siblings, a younger brother and an older sister slightly, who are at their grandpa's house. And their grandpa is this kind of locally famous psychiatrist. He's a therapist who has a unique talent. He's able to help people overcome their fears and phobias by facing them. But he's got a caveat. Anytime he does one of his therapy sessions, which are private behind closed doors, he has a recording device. And he always wants his client, his patient, to basically get straight to the point. What do they visualize as scary? What do they visualize as their reoccurring phobia? And he will record it and keep it there and kind of put you in a sort of environment where you have to keep imagining, keep thinking about it until you're able to overcome it. Because the only way you can overcome your fear is by facing it. So the daughter, the main character, has an idea that she wants to be a psychiatrist. So she, of course, starts eavesdropping and trying to learn more about, his techniques and secrets. But the grandpa's saying, stay away. You don't understand everything about being as a psychiatrist. There's certain things you have to agree upon. And then they end up playing with the box. They end up playing with the recording device. And they find out that as they try to do a therapy session with each other, that their fears start actually manifesting into reality. And the way they find out is because one of the previous clients talked about spiders, and when they play back her clip, actual spider starts crawling on the couch or the place that they're sitting at. And right away they're weirded out. And the brother talks about how he watched a killer dog movie growing up. Not Cujo, but it's kind of implied to be like a pseudo Cujo, where there's this killer Rottweiler that wants to tear people's throats out and is horrifying. And quickly, that dog starts to manifest and starts inhabiting the house and trying to kill the brother. And the daughter has a reoccurring sleep paralysis nightmare that there is a maniac woman in her closet that has a sock, like a little pantyhose over her head, and she's got these long nails, and that she gets into a trance, opens up the closet, and the lady comes out and scratches her eyeballs out or tries to. And that lady may or may not end up coming into the house. And quickly they realize that this is an occult box and that fear itself may be an entity that maybe signed a deal with their grandpa and is now coming back to reclaim his prize. This is a great episode. It is genuinely horrifying. The scenes of the killer Rottweiler is scary. The fact that it very much feels like a Cujo type of thing. The idea that there is a crazy, mentally ill lady hiding in your closet that explicitly wants to scratch your eyeballs out. This is a kids' horror show, people, and that is some adult horror level stuff. That is some strangers level type of stuff where you got crazy people in your closets, real life fears. And Fear itself, the actor, is actually from Midnight Madness, which is a fan favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. He is horrifying, man. He looks like a living skull. He looks like a skeleton with skin stretched over his face. If those of you know about Blood Meridian, look it up on Google Images. There's a picture of a guy smiling. He looks identical to that. Really creepy, really cool episode. And it has an idea that the grandpa kind of unofficially sold his soul to the devil, in a way without explicitly saying it. And at the same time, there's the idea that fear never goes away. So this is not something you can escape. So that's my honorable mention.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that episode up because I remember the first time I watched Fear Never Knocks and seeing Christopher Heyerdahl's performance, just seeing chewing it up with what's her name, Ariel Winter or whatever her name is.
I believe so.
Like a younger version of her, and then the little brother character. That was petrifying to me. Let alone seeing like the scenes like you brought up with the dog and the woman in the closet. That episode has it just has that recipe of a zeitgeist going on with it. You have the unique premise of an occult box, it's kind of like R.L. Stein's The Howler when you think about it. It has some similar tropes there going on from the Nightmare Room book and I guess episode, but we don't talk about that piece of crap. Uh, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that when you watch it, you're like, all right, I could vibe with the idea, and then when you see the execution, you're like, they went there, and you're just immensely impressed. Great honorable mention. Micah, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I haven't seen that episode in a while, but I do remember being like genuinely creeped out when I did see it. Like, especially the woman in the closet. Like I remember like the scene of like where it's like slowly panning towards the closet at the end, and you just get that sudden jump scare with her. Like that is such a good scene of like genuine tension that you would see, like as you said, in an adult horror movie. And something that like I'm shocked Haunting Hour managed to pull off when it's target audience is of course kids.
Yeah, this is like when you think about kids horror, some people like to say that it's like riding a bike with training wheels. You want to get them used to riding the bike before you take the training wheels off. For kids horror, the mindset is the training wheels is the haunting hour, right? And then they throw them on the bike. But episodes like that, man, these are for two-wheeled kids, man. And like these are kids that are already riding without the training wheels, and they're just like, holy crap, that was a bumpy road to get over. Yeah, that episode, yeah, it's an absolute banger. Trust us, if you haven't seen Fear Never Knocks from the Haunting Hour, stop and go watch it real quick and then come back. And do that for all the honorable mentions.
I was gonna say two of the best scenes from it too is that scene where I think Ariel Winter, she starts like trying to imagine herself being saved and the door handles to their house goes away so they can't escape, and she's like, my grandpa is in the basement with the shotgun, and literally the main guy starts going you're not getting saved. And I'm like, oh my god, this episode went there.
He's not wrong, people. He's not wrong.
Not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Micah, do you want to go next?
Sure. So my honorable mention is another Haunting Hour episode. We're talking about scary kids horror episodes. Haunting Hour is kind of the obvious shoe-in because there's an overabundance. But the one I'm going to talk about is the technical, unofficial two-parter, Dead Body and Dead Bodies. And this is definitely one of the most, I think one of my favorite episodes of the show, especially Dead Bodies. That Dead Body is still very good, but I think has its weaker moments. But basically the story of Dead Body, Part one is that it's about this kid named Will, who is this kind of loner. He's this kind of, kind of the awkward, kind of nerdy kid stereotype you get in a lot of these kind of kids' horror shows. And he has this crush on a girl named, I believe, Anna. It's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah, he has a crush on this girl named Anna. And basically, he ends up meeting this kid named Jake Skinner, who is this kind of 1950s greaser looking dude who's very mysterious, but also kind of is willing to help Will out, scare the bullies, and just kind of help him out in school in general. And they kind of form a close friendship with each other. And eventually you learn some stuff about Jake Skinner, where he died in a fire back in, I can't remember what year it was, the 50s, I think. And eventually he sends Will back in the time and has him die in his place, so that when Will comes back into the current time, he's the ghost and Jake is the real living person. And that's kind of where that episode ends. And it's a really dark ending. A lot of controversy sparked from that ending from a lot of parents for how dark that ending went. But that ending, I think, is the best part of that whole episode. But then you get to Dead Bodies, which is later in season 3 as a technical unofficial part 2. And it picks up pretty much right after the first episode left off. Will is, stuck in this spirit realm, and he's trying to get used to what it's like being dead, while Jake's kind of rubbing it in his face that he is alive. And Jake ends up going after Anna and ends up, being successfully dating her. But Death has some other plans for Jake and comes back after him and decides he wants him back and marks Jake with this rotting wrist that continues to spread throughout the episode and gives Jake this ticking time bomb where he has to quickly try and figure out a way to get his life back before he rots away completely. And it's just another very dark episode. A lot of really surprisingly grisly imagery in it, especially Jake's demise at the end of the episode. It's one of those holy shit, they actually went there routes with the visuals. And it's a great episode. Really dark, really fun. The guy who plays Jake Skinner, I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but he does a great job. I think all the actors do great. And there's a lot of good atmosphere and tension, especially in that part too. And yeah, I just really enjoy this episode.
Yeah, Matt Angel he's great in that episode. Also, it's funny that your and I honorable picks talk about existential beings, because in mine it's you can't escape fear. In yours, you can't escape death. Death always wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great pick. We've covered Dead Body and Dead Bodies on the podcast previously, and we faced it off with an episode we might talk about later. But I will say Dead Body and Dead Bodies for Haunting Hours standard is a very unsettling story wholesale, because it's one of those stories where you start to empathize with the villain, but what happens to him is horrible and horrifying in the first part. And the second part, I think it's arguably even worse. What happens to him? No spoilers, but yeah, go watch Dead Body and Dead Bodies before you go any further, because holy crap, the body horror in Dead Bodies is incredible. And the decrepitness of Jake Skinner and all that. Jake Skinner is arguably one of the most well-known villains from the Haunting Hours TV show. I would put him on the Mount Rushmore up there, maybe with Fear and another episode villain we're going to talk about, maybe even another episode villain we're also going to talk about on the actual list. Debatable. There's many other monsters like Mascot, Big Yellow, right? That you could throw on there. But yeah, Jake Skinner, fantastic character. Well-made episodes. Matt Angel's a scene chewer. He's also in one of my personal favorite episodes, Creature Feature, which we haven't covered yet on the podcast. But yeah, great duology there. Or unofficially official two-parter that everybody needs to experience from the show.
And it's scary because, as Micah hinted, parents called in because about the dark ending from the first one. So there's actual controversy involving this one.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the few episodes that actually got parents into a ruckus. That and Scarecrow, but Scarecrow is a battle for another day when we face that off with something. I think we have it planned.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And also, we just got to talk about how much of a glow up the story of the episode is compared to the short story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Shout out to the writers for that.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, great picks, everybody. Sticking with Haunting Hour is very admirable because my honorable mention also comes from Haunting Hour. So everybody out there listening, you have some episodes to watch from this show. All right, this is a two-parter, so I think you got about 5 episodes to watch now. But my episode is a two-parter from the show. I've always thought, that this episode just had that twang of like seriousness that you just don't find in kids horror all that much, where it's just basically straight just serious tone the whole time. There's no levity hardly, except in like the first 5 minutes of the episode, but even then it's about as much levity as a serious tone PG-13 horror movie out there. Which when I rewatched this episode for this podcast, I was like, man, this really does feel like basically what movies these days are putting out as PG-13 horror, but I actually think this actually does it better. It's based on a popular urban legend. If you've ever heard of the Bloody Mary chant, when you turn off all the lights in your bathroom and you chant Bloody Mary 3 times, supposedly you're supposed to see the spirit of the dead woman appear in your mirror. And it scared us all as kids, especially if you went in there with no lights or maybe with a flashlight, however you wanted to do the ritual game. Um, it got everybody talking, right? So obviously the inspiration of that legend inspired this episode called Scary Mary. Now, Scary Mary on the surface is pretty formulaic in structure. You have a slumber party with some girls, some teenage girls, looking to have some fun, looking to play around with the supernatural and the occult. But instead of pulling out a Ouija board, they decide to play with a loaded gun almost with this urban legend of Scary Mary. And as we learn in the episode, Scary Mary has her own fair share of lore and backstory about her that you'll learn. I don't want to spoil it all for you. But essentially, our main heroine of the tale goes into her bathroom and does the chant, or maybe in front of a mirror. I forget the exact details. But when she does the chant, nothing happens. But when she walks away, we see a figure appear in the mirror, and that figure might be stalking her for the rest of part one until we find out inevitably after her having some signs given to her and some weird occurrences happen around her that makes her feel unsettled and how she confides that into her, I guess, boyfriend of sorts. Um, she gets pulled into the mirror. And part two picks up with her in the mirror, where we learn essentially what's going to happen to her and what has happened to other people who have dared play around with this urban legend. And her said boyfriend has to be the hero to come rescue her. And if you're wondering, do we get to meet the titular Scary Mary in this episode? You sure do. And boy, oh boy. Do they do something in this episode that I've only ever seen done in maybe like the Tale of the Fire Ghost from Are You Afraid of the Dark, and then involves human actors possibly playing around with potentially real fire. I can't really tell if it's CGI or partially CGI, partially practical, but holy crap, man. That's all I'm going to leave it at. So, yeah, for me, I think this episode, whenever I think about the scariest, I just think about like the tone of this one and how just foreboding it is and how straight laced it is about it. There's no sugarcoating in going on in this episode. There's no real levity, like I said, other than the slumber party bits. And even then, the story really wastes no time getting you into the mix of this character experiencing some what she thinks is hallucinations, but she's actually being stalked and pursued and hunted by some otherworldly nefarious being that keeps your intrigue and keeps you creeped out to a point, so that way when it does build up in that part two and you get those answers and you see literally, I guess figuratively as well, what's underneath the mask going on, it's absolutely terrifying. Yeah, it does borrow tropes from other popular kids horror episodes like the Tale of Many Faces and some other stories out there. Obviously it's pulling from the urban legend of Bloody Mary, but dare I say it does a great job at it. It does a great job at reimagining its own story, has its similar backgrounds to the urban legend of Bloody Mary, but there's enough differences to kind of chew on. And really, what sticks out to me, I guess, the most, other than just the story being straight laced, is that the ending, because it's Haunting Hour, implies that um, sometimes heroes don't come out unscathed, and I'll just leave it there. But yeah, it leaves on a cliffhanger. It possibly could have spawned into another spinoff, like sequel, I guess, if they wanted to build on that. But I think it ended pitch perfect. This is one to definitely watch with the lights off at night, and make sure you get some food to put into your belly that makes you kind of like drowsy a little bit, so that way you you're caught off guard when some jump scares happen. That's all I'm going to recommend to you. But yeah, go watch this in the dark.
Yeah, I remember growing up in elementary school and all the kids, including me, got dared to do Bloody Mary. And I used to always be scared of the Bloody Mary urban legend. I did it once and I scared myself shitless and ran out. So, Scary Mary has just always been one that as a kid I was scared. And even now, you see fans of Haunting Hour talking about it, being like, no, this is still messed up, even as a grown man or woman. So it's definitely a great pick.
Yeah, I think it's one of those episodes that, like, obviously, Haunting Hour wasn't afraid with playing around with the ages of the kids and the actors, but even for teenage, standards here for these being teenagers, this stuff, if it was put into a PG-13 movie, people would think that that was pretty scary. So, it has theatrical chops to it.
Hmm.
Like, I actually kind of made a joke, but I think I'm being serious when I say this. I'm like, this feels like The Conjuring for kids. Almost. So, yeah, go watch this episode. Okay, Micah, do you have anything you want to add before we get on to our official top five?
Not really. No, I think you guys pretty much all covered all the same thoughts I have about it. So I think we can just move on.
All right, so now we're in the actual top five. The actual top five, and we don't mean to disappoint anybody if your favorite episode or the scariest episode to you is not on this list. We're just saying that with the criteria we mentioned before, that these episodes have that cinematic quality. They have that horror movie chop to it that most episodes just don't bring. Okay,
And
and this is
also, I
where
just want to
it hits
preface
home.
before we go forward. I know some of you are going to be disappointed that some episodes that you have, you're probably like, these were some of the scariest scenes. Remember, we're not doing scariest scenes. We're just doing scariest episodes. So the whole thing got to be scary.
Mm-hmm. And I think we can start basically in like the no better way than to bring up a Goosebumps episode. It's an R.L. Stein special, and I think it came out in season two, if I'm not mistaken. And I will say this: as a kid, I thought this episode was one of the scariest things I had ever seen. And granted, I was watching like adult horror movies, but for kids' horror standards, I still thought that this was scary. All right. And still to this day, when I watch this episode, I still can't believe that the Goosebumps TV show decided to keep, I guess, the tone and the heart of the book that it adapted true in this episode. There's really no levity at all going on in this episode whatsoever. It is straight up dark and foreboding the entire experience, all 42 minutes of it. And the episode in question is Welcome to Dead House. Now, welcome to Dead House's episode, y'all. If you're unfamiliar or haven't seen the episode in a long time, it is mildly a loose, or I guess in some aspects a very loose adaptation. But it essentially follows the Benson family that we know from the classic original '62 Goosebumps book as they move to a new town of Dark Falls, and they very quickly meet Compton Dawes, which is, I guess, the resident real estate agent of the town that has brokered the home. I guess in like a, I think the book touches on it, and the episode kind of touches on it too, where the family have inherited the house, and the dad works from home. I guess he's a writer or something. So the kids have up and moved their former lives to move to this place where there's nobody outside during broad daylight, and everybody seems to be locked away in their house. And our lead character, Amanda, and her brother Josh have to kind of navigate the story and kind of figure out why nobody goes out during the daytime. And shortly there after they move in, Amanda, she starts to kind of feel that somebody's in her room at night when she's sleeping, and she hears these scratching noises coming through a wall in her bedroom, and we see in the closet there's hands breaking out of the wall. And all this crazy stuff going on. You're like, okay, is this like people under the stairs from Wes Craven? Like, what's going on with this, right? But as you learn in the story, not everything is as it seems. There's some backstory, and the backstory is pretty much what you get from the book, to a degree, where there was a tragic incident that happened in Dark Falls that have changed the denizens of Dark Falls to, I guess, stay as a community still, but they need certain sustenance to keep that communal energy alive, if you get what I'm saying, right? And in the episode, there's a certain thing that keeps them safe, but once that's removed in part two, the tone completely goes straight dark the rest of the time. And it is something to experience. And I'm not even going to go into any spoilers with that, but absolutely fantastic stuff. Absolutely fantastic stuff, especially for that 90s show standards. Wow. I, yeah, I'm just going to pass it around whoever wants to talk about it. But yeah.
I mean, Welcome to Dead House. It's my favorite Goosebumps book. I always thought of it as the darkest and scariest Goosebumps book. So I'm actually very happy that the episode, despite the 90s show having its cheesy moments, its corny moments, this is the one episode, one of the few, there might be another one, that kept a serious tone throughout. It kept it serious, kept it dark, really dreary episode. There are creepy scenes in there, like when Amanda's inside of her room and the shadow of, Ray Thurston pops up in the, silhouette behind her and walks off. She hears people yelling in her house. She sees people walking around. And that climax scene, for those of you unfamiliar, it is one heck of a climax scene. It is one of the most iconic climax scenes. And it is horrifying. It is a deviation from the book, but it's actually something I wish was in the book. It's something that's so good that I think a lot of us were like, wow, this is iconic. Genuinely a scary episode, even down to the way that they do the makeup and effects on the kids. These kids, some of the kids in the neighborhood, they look almost half dead, no pun intended. They look sunken, they look sullen, they look depressed. And, it's almost one of those episodes that you really felt like at a certain point the family's not going to get out. Like you feel like, oh, these guys are doomed. Like, what are these guys going to do to get out of this situation? And, no spoilers, but that twist ending lets you know that this book, the book did not miss a beat, the episode did not miss a beat. It's saying, listen, even when you think that it's all over and everything is good to drop your guard, don't. Because we are going to stick to that dark theme throughout. So, yeah, this
Yeah.
is a great one as a scariest pick.
Yeah. Micah, you have anything you want to add?
Oh yeah, I think Dead House is easily like maybe top 10, possibly even top 5 episodes for me. I'm not sure. I have to kind of reevaluate all that stuff, but it's definitely in the upper echelon of my episode rankings, and it's my third favorite book of the original series so far. And I just think that I just appreciate the fact that this episode is willing to go as dark and serious as it is. Like I just love I mean, you'll see that both of the Goosebumps episodes we chose have this very like gray filter over everything. It looks very decrepit. It looks very atmospheric and just eerie the whole time. I don't know what it is, but the gray filter they put over it, the scenes in this episode, just really add to that dismal kind of hopeless feel, and it just adds to the feel of Dark Falls as a town and as just the environment as a whole. I think the kids do a great job, and again, like as we said, the horror is next level. Like for a kids horror thing, especially Goosebumps, which tends to be pretty light on horror a lot of the time with aside from a handful of episodes. Like I appreciate that they went hardcore with the horror in this one and the implications of what the Dark Falls denizens want to do to the Benson family. And again, like the whole home break-in scene at the end. The scene that always freaked me out as a kid was that scene, I think at the end of part 1, where like the hand is like punching through the wall with like the drywall in its hand is like, that scene alone is just so chilling. And it's such a terrifying visual to just like, especially as a kid, like imagine just like laying in bed at night, sleeping, and suddenly you just see a hand like bust through your door or something like that. Like that is a horrifying thing to envision. And it's just a great episode overall. There's a lot of great mystery to it. And again, like I just appreciate that they went all hardcore with the horror on it.
You also got to factor in that you got the visceral horror, you got the creepy scenes, but you also got the like perfect thing that they nailed with the acting, which is that the idea that you move into a new neighborhood and you have hostile neighbors, and every time that the Benson's interact with the other neighbors, there's always that underlying hint of a threat in every conversation where it's like, what the heck are wrong with these people? Why are the kids and parents like so like there's like a certain tone underneath that they're speaking, like almost making them feel unnerved, making them feel unwelcome, and then you find out the hard way. So really well done.
I think one of the biggest scenes to me, and this is how I know this is a winner for this list, is when you get to the scene where there's a certain wreath involved, and once that wreath is taken care of, and you see that tonal shift immediately take place after, that will send chills down your spine. I'm telling you, even as a grown adult, if you've never seen the episode before, you're gonna be like, "Damn, that was good." Like, props to everybody involved with that episode. I don't know how much red tape they had to go over trying to adapt that book, but what they were able to pull off, especially for that TVY7 era, fantastic. And there's some great performances in the episode. I always thought that the dad kind of reminded me of like a character you would see in like a late '70s horror movie, like Amityville Horror or something. Like he just seems like the family seems strategically cast because they brought something to their roles, um, and it's well performed. The kids are probably the most scared looking that you'll see in Goosebumps, maybe next to another episode we have yet to talk about, which I think has the best performance in the whole show from its lead character. In my opinion, I've always thought that. But yeah, what a great place to start with. And we still have 4 episodes to go. I mean, this is just like, you know, being a kid in a candy store talking about this right now.
Yeah, I also think the thing that adds to the horror of the episode is seeing the parents be scared. Like the fact that the parents are actually involved in the plot and are just as scared as the kids are makes the situation just so much more intense, especially if you're watching this as a kid. Because as a kid, obviously, your parents are the brave ones. They're the ones who are always supposed to protect you. They're the ones who, look for monsters in your closet or under your bed. And so, like, seeing an episode where the parents are just as terrified in this situation is just like, it just adds to that horror levels.
Yeah, this is one of the few episodes that several times during the episode, you'll just be sitting there and hitting this face. Because something bad's about to pop off, or it's getting close to that wire being cut.
Yeah. You know that the bullet's in the chamber. You just don't know who's gonna shoot it first. You're just waiting for that moment. I love that episode. All right, so now moving on to, I guess, the next pick on the top 5 here. We're going back to Haunting Hour. After we just had 3 honorable mentions from Haunting Hour, but this is a well lauded and well regarded episode from that Haunting Hour TV show. A lot of people have said that this is one of the most iconic, if not their favorite episode from the show. And I get that if you're one of those people that will say this about this episode, because it truly is unnerving. It is one of these episodes that when you watch it, you're like, wow, like that was a little bit too much, but in a good way. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't ever have too much of a good thing, right? That's what I think about when I think about this episode. And we're going to be looking at the Halloween fan favorite, Pumpkinhead. Now, who wants to go and tell us about Pumpkinhead and start us off?
I could take it if you want.
Yeah.
So Pumpkinhead is the Halloween episode, and again, very iconic because we got a new Tubi movie that was based off of it loosely, and we got a sequel coming out. So fan favorite for good reason. It's about this basically suburb town that has a little problem. And it's not a little problem, it's a big problem because they have a lot of missing kids, especially come around Halloween time. A lot of people just go missing, and it's gotten to the point that parents are scared to send out their kids. They don't want kids going out trick-or-treating, very much stranger danger. A lot of the local high schools and middle schools are just doing local trick-or-treating in there, and you come back home safe with chaperones and stuff. But you have a group of kids, a family, an older sister, middle brother, and younger brother who want to still experience Halloween for the way it's supposed to be. And one of the ways that they think about is going to a place called Farmer Palmer's Pumpkin Patch, which is a place that you can get some fresh pumpkins at. But it's with a little bit of hesitancy because the guy who runs it Farmer Palmer is kind of a creepazoid. People don't like him. People think that there might be something off with him. He might be unhinged. And they decide to go there. And instead of just getting a pumpkin, they decide to do what a lot of haunting hour kids do, which is be nosy. Nosy as all hell, and start investigating places that they shouldn't be in the pumpkin patch. And they go into a shed, which is a madhouse of nightmare horror works. Because they see these demonic looking jack o' lantern hybrid people that are in various different scary situations. One is slumped on a chair with a knife in its head, like it just got stabbed. Another one is on an operating table, like strapped down, and there's ones that are operating on it and about to cut it open, Texas Chainsaw Massacre style. So they're like, what the heck is going on at this farm? And when they try to escape and get away, Farmer Palmer kind of unnerves them because he goes up to them. The middle kid ends up falling into a ditch, which is just in the middle of the farm. And he starts rubbing his head and telling him that you're not ripe yet, kid. So immediately, stranger danger alarms go off. They run off. But unfortunately, they did something wrong. They stole a couple pumpkins, which you're not supposed to do. And when they bring them home, they find a grisly sight, which is that inside of the first pumpkin, it's rotten and there's worms and maggots inside of it. And even more unnerving, in the second one, there is human teeth inside of the gourd that they cut open, which lets them think that is this like a murder situation? Like, is the missing kids having something to do with maybe Farmer Palmer? And then somebody may or may not get kidnapped, and they have to go to save that person, and they may end up going back to the very horrifying, demonic, crazy place that they don't want to be at. And let's just say that they bit off more than they can chew. So that's essentially the plot. This is a horrifying episode. This is the scariest, one of the scariest monster designs ever made, and it's iconic. The pumpkin heads in this episode are horrific. The rotten pumpkins, their teeth, the way that they're in all these horrifying situations. There's a scene in the climax where the older sister almost feels like she's in an analog video game with a flashlight going from room to room in the shed, and she may or may not see her brother there with the rotted jack-o'-lantern on his head, and he's in a bloody surgeon kind of situation by an operating table. There is moments where she's walking through the pumpkin patch and you see crazy silhouettes on the side just sneaking and hulking, almost looking like they're about to approach the family. It is such a scary episode. And the fact that you got missing children, you got, kids' teeth inside of pumpkins, implying a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, to be honest, guys, and I'm going to be fully transparent, Farmer Palmer here gives off like some John Wayne Gacy vibes. He just gives off like serial killer, targeting kids vibes throughout the entire episode. And it's not subtle. It is not subtle where it seems like you're reaching. No, in the episode, they literally are terrified of this guy. And he's a creep. He's a weirdo. And the whole idea that, you shouldn't go investigating things you're not supposed to. AKA, you fuck around and you find out. And this is one of those episodes that's like, a big moral lesson that if something is bad, if something is hinted to be a bad place, do not go, do not mess with it, because it's going to be a lot worse than you can expect. And what would normally be an adult horror story, some people walking into a serial killer's house, here it's kids' horror version. It's jack-o'-lanterns, it's a crazy farmer, and all this crazy stuff. So, yeah, easily one of the scariest episodes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. For me, when I think about this episode, the first thing I always think about is when the kids are at night at Farmer Palmer's farm, and they enter that shed, and they see the pumpkin carcasses, or I guess dummies laying around. That is so eerie. Like, the first thing in my head would be like, why is this guy collecting pumpkin headed mannequins or whatever in his shed? Like, what is this? I would have been out within the first 3 seconds. Talk about some dumb character choices to stay around that long. Get yourself possibly kidnapped or found out by the creepy farmer. First instinct is probably your right instinct. Get the hell out of there. Why didn't they leave? I know some people might be like, these kids are stupid. But then we would have no episode to talk about, which thankfully continues on because the monsters in this episode are nightmare fuel. If I saw these creatures coming after me, I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I'd lay in the fetal position and just accept my fate. I'm like, I'm dead. All right, just kill me now. Get it over with. You guys win. You know, the demons have come. You have conquered. Uh, but yeah, absolute incredible episode. Um, I'm kind of glad that it is just a single length episode too, because it's one of those stories that are short and sweet. It takes the concept from the short story it's adapting and builds on it into a way where it fits the time crunch quite perfectly. The fact that it got a sequel doesn't surprise me, but that sequel, we don't like to talk about that around here. Return of the Pumpkinheads, absolute trash tier episode from Haunting Hour. Um, yeah, enough said. Don't watch that if you haven't seen Pumpkinhead before. Watch this. You might have heard of the Tubi movie, which is fitting because we're talking about cinematic feeling stories. This story did get turned into a movie. You can watch that too, I guess, but stick to this. You'll be all right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is one of the ones I remember the most from watching as a kid from the Haunting Hour. That just like genuinely is it's horrific. And again, it's one of those things where like the Haunting Hour is just not holding back as it usually doesn't hold back. Kids die, horrible things happen. This is something that I always respect Haunting Hour to do because it's something most kids horror media wouldn't have the balls to get away with. But Haunting Hour just goes for it gung ho almost every single time, and it just adds a much more effective punch to the stakes of these episodes because you know that kids could die, and so it just makes you feel so much more on edge. It's like, are they going to get out of this alive, or is something bad going to happen to them? And I think that just adds to the intensity and horror of this episode, especially, and kind of how it plays out. The scene in the shed, as you guys mentioned, is just probably the most disturbing scene of the episode, in my opinion. And just like the implications of what happens to the brother, and just kind of just everything that happens in that third act climax is just very, again, it's just very unsettling. It has a very Halloween vibe to it, even if there's not as many not an abundance of decorations or anything that you really traditionally experience or associate with Halloween. It still has that quintessential Halloween feel to it that it kind of makes it like a must watch around this Halloween season, right alongside the Haunted Mask episodes and Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns and some of those.
It's also one of those episodes that you like over time realize some of the clever things they do. Because like Haunting Hour knew that it had a low budget, so they're like, okay, because of the missing person storyline, that's why there's not a lot of decorations because people just don't want to celebrate. Parents are scared. Also, I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but the whole shed thing, I think like now recently I realize why it's supposed to be so scary. I think it's supposed to be in like a PG way, kind of like taxidermied human beings. Like if you'd walked into a serial killer's house and they got like taxidermied corpses all over the place. That's basically what Farmer Palmer does with these jack-o'-lanterns. They're literally laid up in that type of fashion. So it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy they got away with this, and it's crazy they came up with stuff like that.
Yeah, it is crazy. Haunting Hour, I think when you compare it to other shows, I think the reason why they go darker often than not is because they love playing a good morality tale. They love pulling that shock value tales from the crypt, mantra of being like, you know what, we're gonna go a little over the top at the end, but it's for a reason. You gotta respect that because majority of kids horror back in the golden era, Haunting Hour was a silver age era show, basically like the second coming or the bringing back kids horror of its time. Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps? They were dark at times if they wanted to be, but it was usually not in that morality tale kind of way. It was just like the story brought you there, and sometimes. But Haunting Hour, they had a mission to make every story hit with you in a way or register in a way with you like you don't want to make those same mistakes that those kids made because they got themselves into this. And I think it works. I think it worked out for them splendidly well, most often than not. But yeah, this is one of the stories that do it very, very, very well. Absolutely dark, absolutely sinister. The makeup effects will shock you. Even the ending, the twist ending, and the stuff with the teeth and the gourds of the pumpkin. Like why? Like this stuff like that, they didn't necessarily need to do or go that far with, but they did, and I'm glad they did. You know? It's like the little things matter with this episode, and like Horlander said, this is an episode where you can watch it and then start to appreciate the little things that you start to pick up on with it. So yeah, great pick for this list. Um, but yeah, we have three more to talk about, so I guess we should move on. Because this next one is another Goosebumps tale, and oh my gosh, people are probably like, "It's the Haunted Mask, right?" No, it's not the Haunted Mask. No, 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 no. Okay, I can see Vera out there crying. Vera, if you're watching, we're sorry, buddy, but this is not the Haunted Mask. This episode, I think, is understatably put probably the best made kids horror episode of all time. I don't even think it's like a competition, really, because of how well this episode was made. Like, it blows my mind that they filmed this episode in Canada, of all places, and they were able to capture what it's like to be in what is known in this part of the United States, the Redneck Riviera, or AKA the Florida Swampland. Um, it's none other than the Werewolf of Fever Swamp. The Werewolf of Fever Swamp, man. Go figure. It's one of the scariest episodes. It's well deserved to be on this list because if you've ever seen this episode, you know exactly where we're coming from with its tone, with how it's shot, with its cinematic quality in part two, and how it showcases this night of turmoil with our main character. Micah, would you like to tell us what the episode is about and then move into your thoughts first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, Werewolf of Fever Swamp is a two-parter episode centered around a boy named Grady and his family who have moved down into this like abandoned this small cabin in the middle of a swamp, and it's because his parents are scientists who are studying these unique swamp deer and are trying to see how they would exist in their natural habitat. And while they're having a hard time adjusting, Grady ends up meeting this kid named Will, and Will is this kind of very friendly kid. He's very kind of mysterious, but again, he's very kind towards Will, and they kind of form a fast friendship with each other. And Grady eventually starts hearing these mysterious howls in the middle of the night. He starts just kind of experiencing all these weird things going on in the swamp, and he hears from Will about this legend that a werewolf lurks in the swamp, and it might be this swamp hermit that Grady has an encounter with pretty early on in the episode. And eventually, Grady ends up adopting this dog who he names Vandal because the dog breaks into his house, and they just kind of take him in because he was a stray. And again, things just start escalating from there. They discover a dead rabbit. There's eventually the deer either are killed or they end up escaping. I can't remember which one it is. And just things keep escalating. And eventually Grady ends up getting kidnapped by the swamp hermit. And, he thinks that this hermit's the werewolf. And it turns out it's not. I'm not going to say who the werewolf is, but it's a big twist involving it. If you've seen the episode, obviously, or even if you've read the book but haven't watched the episode, you'll know who the werewolf is. But it's a really great twist that really it's kind of predictable, but at the same time, they do it in such a clever way where I think it's still effective, even with the predictable nature of it. And again, just going on to the fear factor of this episode, it is just probably the darkest tone episode after Dead House. As I mentioned with Dead House, it has that same kind of really gray, grimy kind of cinematic filter over it that really just adds to the atmosphere, especially in like a swamp. They did a really good job recreating what a swamp looks like. I don't know where they filmed this, but it really does look like a Florida swamp. And again, just like the amount of fog, they're probably using the fog machines and stuff to just like pump all this fog in just to really add that eerie, lonely feel to it. And again, it's just the atmosphere and the overall dismal tone this episode has just really sells the horror. And there's a lot of great sequences. The swamp hermit is freaky as hell. The actor did such a good job performing him, and he has this, even though he ends up may or may not being not like as awful as Grady suspects him to be, he still is just very creepy, and just his mannerisms. He's very just like intense, and you can almost he's like a hermit, obviously, so you can tell that he has these like lacking of social skills and just is very aggressive because of what the werewolf may or may not have done to his family. And I just think that's a really effective way of going around it. Of course, the werewolf stuff is great in part 2. The whole scene of the werewolf attacking the mom and the sister in the barn is one of the like best scenes in all of Goosebumps, in my opinion. I think there's just so much tension and fear involved in that. And it's just like, again, it's another scenario where there's like real life stakes. Like these people, if this werewolf gets to them, these people will die. It's not like some of these other monsters like Slappy, where they just become a slave for all of eternity. If this monster gets them, they're dead. And it just again adds to that level of stakes. And I just think that, and like even like showing like even getting away with like showing an actual dead rabbit on screen during the initial werewolf attacks and stuff. It's just like it's impressive that this episode went as far as it did for a TVY7 show, especially back in the 90s on syndicated television. And it's one of those episodes that's just like it's one of the few episodes of Goosebumps where I would consider it a genuine masterpiece.
I agree. I think you got franchises, right, that have consistent fun and good to great quality, but then you have sometimes the token examples that provide legitimacy for those franchises. For the Goosebumps TV show in the 90s, for me, that is Werewolf of Fever Swamp. On a technical basis, it is remarkable what they were able to achieve with this episode in terms of cinematography, location and setting choices, accuracy levels to the book, and even adding things that people still to this day swear are in the book, but no, they're only in the episode. And the fact that it makes this story so electric is really, really, and I mean this with all sincerity to everybody involved making this, it is truly spectacular on every front. My favorite moments in this episode, if it's not the tension in the lighting and certain reveals in the part 2 with like the moonlighting on the werewolf and all of that and how great that looked, my favorite sequences of scenes in this whole episode, counting both parts, is the scene at night when Grady's wandering at night trying to find Vandal, trying to see if anybody's out there at Will's house. And you just, the way that shot, man, looks like a horror movie. Like to the T. I don't know who was in charge of, setting up photography that day, or this, setting up the set and figuring out where they're going to shoot and what angles. But holy crap, man, when you watch this, you're going to be taken aback by how great this episode looks and how well it holds up for it being over 30 years old now. I mean, it is one of these episodes that I think is a must watch. If you have never experienced anything in kids horror and you just want to watch something from these franchises, you need to watch this episode. And some people might say, no, you need to watch Haunted Mask 1 and 2 and all this. I get that too, but no, you need to watch Werewolf of Fever Swamp's episode.
Yeah, no, this is one of the most easily, I think, in any kids horror book, in any kids horror episode, movie, just altogether media, it's the most threatening appearance of any werewolf that I've ever seen in kids horror. I mean, it is the best scene in all of Goosebumps involving any villain. I don't care about Slappy, I don't care about Haunted Mask. Nothing touches the scene that when his sister is in the house and she slowly turns around and you got that wall of shadow and just the snout comes through the wall of shadow and starts growling. It is one of the most iconic and scariest scenes. And from that point, you get the whole chase sequence. It's through first-person shaky camera, and you got the noises of like the rabid dog just going, rah, 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 chasing her. The fact that it, hops on top of the barn and starts trying to break in to get to him. The fact that it smashes, we talked about Dead House, where an arm smashes through the wall. Here you got the paw smashing through the barn, trying to grab the mom, and she starts smacking it. And also, you get some body horror because, there's a certain character who, is obviously the werewolf, and their transformation sequence is not something that empowers them. It's actually painful. It's actually something that they have to fight. And it's actually something that you see them writhe in agony and start screaming and start yelling that the moment that the moon comes back after some clouds block it. It's a lot of good stuff in there. And, the swamp hermit, the fact that there are on-screen kills, there's an on-screen kill, there's an off-screen kill, I should say, an on-screen attack. There's implied kills, as Micah mentioned. Maybe this, kill count has dated back some years, and it's just a really intense episode. It is the most intense episode in all of Goosebumps, and one of the most intense episodes in all of kids horror. And yeah, it's really just feels like a movie.
It does,
Yeah.
from start to finish, man.
Yeah, and it's like a testament to like the cinematography. Also, is a testament to like how they're actually managed to make the werewolf intimidating. Because like, let's be honest here, the costume looks a little cheesy when you see it in some more lighting, like some of the lighting and stuff. But just the way they shoot the werewolf and the way the whoever is in the suit is doing the physical acting, it takes that cheesy looking costume and actually makes it intimidating and scary. And it's just again, they just do such a good job framing it and lighting it in a way to kind of hide some of that cheesiness and make it feel like an actual threat.
And compared to the book, where the confrontation scene is super short and ends off on kind of a cheesy note, the fate of what happens to a certain character in this episode, when you think about it, is like, oh my god, they really went there. That's quite a horrific end to a certain entity. So yeah, all the way through, just a fantastic episode. And the idea that things might not be over, again, reoccurring thing. The ending is not always happy. There might be some more stuff going on.
And I just want to put this out there. There's been some great performances from child actors in these shows from time to time, and there's a lot that come to mind. I know Catherine Long playing Carly Beth comes to mind, and there's quite a few Haunting Hour episodes that I'm sure people can think about. Maybe even a handful of Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. But in my humble opinion, Brendan Fletcher's performance in this episode it equally contributes just as much as the people behind the makeup, behind the cinematography. His performance as Grady and his fear and his feel like his portrayal of peril that you see throughout this story is so well done. I think that he gave the best performance I have ever seen in kids horror. And I know I do love Catherine Long's performance in Haunted Mask. For all the Haunted Mask stands out there, hi, how are you doing? I'm just saying Brendan Fletcher's performance in this can go toe to toe with that. And I think it kind of goes over that in some aspects too. Just the way he's able to connect you to how he's feeling, and like he's so good at showing emotion. He's so good at just being in his craft that it saddens me that he never had, like, I guess the most explosive career. Yeah, he was in Freddy vs. Jason. Yeah, he was actually in Haunting Hour as a villain, and Lots of Luck. It's cool to see him there. But he was incredible. Absolutely incredible in this episode. Absolutely. And I think that also deserves to be mentioned here because it's very rare that you get that level of acting from these kids in this show. And granted, Brendan Fletcher, he was in the original Air Bud movie. So he did have some experience in some Hollywood movies before he did this show. So, or I guess while he was doing the show. So that maybe adds to it. I don't know. But yeah, League of His Own for male actors of Goosebumps.
Also, one of the best supporting actors goes to the guy who plays Will. I mean, Grady's not the only one in Pain and Fear. There's a certain scene with Will that was an amazing acting scene for Goosebumps standard where he has to show a lot of pain and has to go through and show some of the weaknesses. So, yeah, good job to both.
Yeah. I mean, they even got the guy who played the sheriff in My Bloody Valentine, the original 1982 slasher movie, to play the Swamp Hermit. I wish I remembered his name, but he was incredible too. Watching him eat food the way he eats food in this with his nasty ass nails, that will scar you just by looking at that. I'll tell you that. That kind of made me look at chicken a weird way for a long time when I was a kid. I think that was chicken he was eating. I hope it was. Yeah, absolutely incredible stuff. So yeah, moving on to, I guess, the last two here. We have our first and only Are You Afraid of the Dark mention of the night. Hey, Are You Afraid of the Dark got something on the board, y'all? But I think for this one, it deserves it. This is the token time where I think Are You Afraid of the Dark brought something to the table that I don't think any other show quite did until Haunting Hour, of course, with Dead Body and Dead Bodies. We actually faced this story off against it in a previous podcast. This comes from season 6, which is a quite divisive season of Are You Afraid of the Dark for most kids horror fans out there that are familiar with the show. But this is the one episode that I think is universally loved from that era of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And it's The Tale of the Secret Admirer, which fantastic episode. Very pseudo young adult in nature. There is no levity again. That seems to be the running trend with these episodes. No levity at all. Just straight serious and forebodingness the whole time. But this story follows a young teenager, maybe she's like a sophomore in high school, around that age, as we follow her in her day-to-day life where she's kind of a wallflower. Guys don't pay her much attention, and when they do, they just seem to be asking her some remedial questions or things about, classwork, homework, whatnot. But it's around, I guess, Valentine's Day, and she starts to get these notes in her locker, basically saying, you know, alluding to the fact that somebody's admiring her from afar, and she's not quite used to male attention, but she has an idea who it could be, and it seems to be this popular jock guy that's in school that she's had a crush on, that she thought would pay no mind to her, and throughout the episode, we see that she actually does start to form genuine feelings for this guy, and maybe this guy starts to feel a genuine way about her too. But pretty quickly, she realizes that after she starts receiving these notes, when she's at home alone in her house one night, there's an intruder that breaks in. And we see in this very, very cinematic way, almost uncannily Hollywood in nature, of her navigating this house, finding that her downstairs door is open, and the chill of night is making the hairs on the back of her neck stand up to the point where she shuts it abruptly and can't help but feel spooked by the whole thing. And then she's frightened to death in her bathroom when she sees a vision of this mutilated figure that looks half burned, half not burned, with an ominous sign written on her mirror. And after her delirium clears, the thing that she thought she saw vanishes, and she can't let that vision escape her mind. And when she goes back to school shortly thereafter, she's still receiving notes, still receiving signs that look like what she thought she saw in her bathroom. And this is progressively making her more upset and unnerved, up until the point where she finally confides in her mom about what's going on. And her mom essentially drops a humongous bombshell. Now, this is treated like a massive reveal in the episode. I don't want to give the spoiler away, but I just want to allude to the fact that her mom may know a lot more information than what the girl thought she might know. And armed with this information, she decides to, I guess, kind of confront it head on with the help of her newfound male friend that she's made in the story. And we see in the climax just how deranged some potential villain could be that's lurking out there, really is, and his true intentions involving her will be stated. And now what ends up happening, you'll have to find out for yourself. But I'm just going to say this up front. I never thought in a million years, and I actually, for the first time ever, watched this episode a few years back, and I was finishing up the final few episodes I never got to watch when, once upon a time on YouTube back in the day, somebody had pirated and put like most of the show out there on YouTube before YouTube had that whole copyright change, and where they had that huge purge of content on the platform. I never got around to watching this. And when I watched it, I remember going straight into Discord. I'm like, y'all need to watch this episode. Holy crap, that was good. And then everybody that I know that have seen this episode since will say that it is one of the best Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes of all time. For me, I think it's easily top 3, no question. Just for the sheer fact of the quality of it. in my opinion, this is the best made Are You Afraid of the Dark episode in terms of technical ability, in terms of tone, in terms of acting chops. I think the lead actress who plays the main character, I mean, she looks exactly like Jennifer Love Hewitt from I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I think that was done on purpose. But holy shit, she was incredible. The titular villain, the secret admirer, Teddy, one of the creepiest villains of Are You Afraid of the Dark ever. I think he pretty much hard confirmed for me inspired Jake Skinner from Haunting Hour. He's the blueprint. He is the foundation of that. He's absolutely outstanding. And the writing of this episode is so clever. And it's not only written so well, but the way that the episode carries out the script here also really helps it because you learn bits and pieces like a genuine mystery and these reveals hit so much deeper and it recontextualizes it to a way where you start to feel the stakes. You start to feel that this is some generational trauma going on. You can start to see there's some symmetry going on with some characters, and it all comes together beautifully. It really does. The fact that this episode was written by the creator of Dora the Explorer, every time I think about that, blows my mind. But this was his one sole contribution to the franchise, and it was fantastic. I am at a loss for words. Dora the Explorer's creator made, in my opinion, the scariest Are You Afraid of the Dark episode by far. Go figure.
Yeah. No. This episode, when I first saw it, I was shocked as well because, we call it pseudo YA because this is basically a point horror book, a Fear Street book with slight modifications done to fit the kids' horror rating. I mean, the whole idea of Teddy, he literally looks identical to Two-Face, from DC Comics. That's his whole look. He's horrific. His personality is horrific. He's a deranged stalker that's writing all these love letters and notes. And, the idea that this girl gets manipulated because she still believes that the secret admirer might be this, star athlete, this star, football player who might be interested in her, and how you see her emotionally break down in the episode. You see her basically start to lose her mind because what would you do if you had a paranormal stalker? I mean, seriously, what would you do if you had a paranormal stalker? No one's going to believe you. You don't believe anybody can help you. And then you find out that this may be a generational thing, that this may be something that's been haunting your family for longer than you can imagine. And, two different generations have to come together to basically stop this. It's crazy. There's a massive, explosive climax. Wink, wink. No pun intended. An explosive climax. It is a crazy story, man. And I love the fact that this is also one of the few, if not the only, love story in kids horror that was not corny or cheesy at all. Most of the time when you see love stories in kids horror, they can be cringe. They can be, too on the nose. This is one that felt completely natural. And again, if you would have added a few things and told me that this was, a point horror book or this was a Fear Street book, I would completely believe you, all the way through. So great job to the guy responsible for Dora the Explorer. Yeah, that's absurd. It's absurd that he went from this to Dora.
Yeah,
Mike,
I think this is definitely. Yeah, it's definitely one of those interesting episodes, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because it's one where it's almost, again, it plays the supernatural side is not as much like a traditional ghost, like a lot of these kids' horror things where, it's the glowing blue person who's somewhat transparent. It's like this, like, almost physical apparition of a person. And again, as you mentioned, yeah, he looks just like Two-Face. It's a fun, really kind of cool looking design that really makes him look intimidating and scary. And just, again, like the idea that you brought up of having a supernatural stalker that you can do nothing to stop is such a horrifying concept because it makes you alone in this scenario, kind of adds to that isolation feel. And yeah, I think even with the generational stuff that is brought up, it kind of almost makes you question, like, in your own life. I mean, obviously, we know the paranormal doesn't exist, at least to the extent that the show presents it. But it still almost makes you kind of raise the questions like, what kind of generational stuff have my parents been hiding from me? It kind of has that, like, it has that lingering thought in the back of your mind of, like, should I be ask my parents about see if they're hiding anything, like anything that could affect me in the future? And it's just, I don't know. I guess it's one of those things where it's like, even with the supernatural stuff, it still invokes a very real life horror scenario that feels very realistic, despite being a ghost. And I just think that that's what makes it the most effective idea. And it does, like, even if it does play into a few tropes, like the whole, person goes into the bathroom sink to wash their face and they look up and there's a ghost in the mirror. Even if that's a very commonplace trope, and especially like kids horror media and stuff, it just done so well in this episode. It just brings such tension and adds such a scary moment to that, especially if knowing that she was home alone. I just feel like that adds to that horror and tension, is just the idea of being home alone and seeing this terrifying figure suddenly appear in your bathroom. So I think there's a lot of very effective horror in this episode that really works, especially for Are You Afraid of the Dark standards, which is usually, I would argue, probably the corniest of the main kids horror shows from the 90s. Like, yes, I know that's going to get me crucified because most people think Goosebumps is cornier, but I think Dark tends to be a lot cornier than Goosebumps. But this is one of those times where it plays it 100% seriously and just does it to wonderful degrees.
Yeah, I mean, the standout scene that everyone got, like, I literally have seen everyone get shocked by is the home break-in scene. Like, when do you ever see such a realistic home break-in scene? And I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. We talk about acting performances. We gotta give a round of applause to the actress who screamed, because her visceral scream when she sees Teddy in the mirror behind her is like straight up Final Girl in a slasher type of stuff. Like, it is such a great performance. Like, I remember when she screamed, I was like, oh my god, this is straight up on some, even though, like you said, Micah, it's supernatural, you could easily, make this into a YA book and just replace it with an actual disfigured stalker that has been, hunting down a family. So yeah, it works.
The common thing that I think we haven't really correlated with most of what we talked about already, but what I think really sends this episode over to the next level is, sometimes, a lot of times in kids horror, these things that happen to these kids are more opportunistic. They're not being singled out. They're not being hunted by their villains in question, right? But here, and kind of in a lot of the other examples we've already shared, like Welcome to Dead House, they've been targeted. She's being deliberately targeted for this. So it comes across as it's more cerebral, it's more personal. There's more of a motivation there that really singles her out, and it doesn't make her like feel like some other characters doing some other things where you're like, oh, this can happen to anyone. No, 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 no. This happens specifically to her, right? So it really does rely on the actress to carry that over, and she does a fantastic job. A fantastic job. I've talked about Brendan Fletcher's performance. She probably, and we've said this in the past, but Are You Afraid of the Dark? The acting's pretty chopped in that show. Not gonna lie, man. It's like, I think Shiv put it best one point. Like, they go to like a school cafeteria and they just pull kids, or
They go to
a Goodwill,
Salvation Army and find people.
Salvation Army, they find some kids. No, I feel like they actually had somebody that was actually trained in acting. It feels professional. That home break-in scene is probably up there with that, scene I talked about in Werewolf of Fever Swamp for me, like one of the best shot scenes I've ever seen in kids horror. It's up there, man. It is super well done, and it almost comes across like when you first watch it, you're like, there's no reason why this looks as good as it does. Like, how it's shot, how it's carried out, how the scene unfolds. I'm just like, damn, that is some master stroke stuff right there, man. Yeah, and we, most of these other stuff that we talked about have like a monster, like a werewolf or zombies or pumpkin-headed creatures. This is just some dude that's half burned, looking like Two-Face, and he's still as creepy and as intimidating as some of these other villains. My only complaint, really, if I had a complaint with the episode, is that I kind of wish he was in more scenes. You know what I mean? Or they could have easily made this into a two-parter. I would have eaten that shit up. But that's just me.
And also, I also think that we notice the pattern is like these episodes are also scary because they hit themes that are like home to us, like relatable in real life. Like when we talked about Fear Never Knocks, we all have phobias, we all have fears, we don't want to confront our fears. Welcome to Dead House. What if you moved into a neighborhood that you're not comfortable with? You're not comfortable with the people. It's going to be an awkward situation. With Pumpkinhead, the whole idea of stranger danger. Here, and unfortunately, this is meant, way too relatable to a lot of young women. Stalker situations. It's unfair. There's no reason that it should happen. It's just bad timing, bad place, and the bad person. And for a lot of as guys, it might be like scary. But I could imagine a lot of young women watching this episode and straight up being horrified, being like, yeah, this is a supernatural threat. But again, you could replace this with any real life creepo that decides to be a stalker and overly obsessed. And it happens, unfortunately, way too much. So it makes it more scary.
Yeah, and even the girl thought it was the jock guy that she liked messing around with her, and that caused the confrontation. But even then, like, it also serves a good message in that, like if you feel like somebody's bothering you, confront it. You like don't just be like, I'm just gonna let this stuff happen to me. Um, Speak up for yourself if you can't have anybody speak on your behalf. You know, so that's also a good message out there for young women, I feel. So yeah, well impactful episode. Um, yeah, which brings us to the last one, and this last one, I think a lot of people are probably crossing their fingers will be on this list, and rest assured it is. We're going back to Haunting Hour one last time. Haunting Hour has had 5 mentions this whole video. So kudos to Haunting Hour for giving everybody out there nightmares and being the scariest kids horror show. This episode, I think without a doubt, has the scariest kids horror monster of all time. Without a doubt. Even though you can kind of look at the episode wholesale, see some problems in it. We're not talking about if it's perfect, we're talking about just the scariest. This, without a doubt, I think has the highest chance of giving you nightmares. The highest chance. And we're going to be talking about Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher from Haunting Hour. Horrorlander, you want to take this one over?
Yeah, so Dreamcatcher from Haunting Hour is a pretty straightforward story with terrifying execution. Basically, about this girl who is going to this camp, an all girls camp, where, of course, they're doing all types of camping activities. She's trying to strike up friends. She feels alone sometimes, so she sparks up some friendship. She also sparks up some hostility with other girls, as it happens in a lot of these isolated camping stories. And being isolated out there is one thing. But unfortunately, she quickly finds out that this specific camp has an urban legend. And she finds it out when they're making actual dream catchers, those tools that, in Native American culture became very popularized, which is the fact that there is an actual entity, a Freddy Krueger type of entity which stalks your nightmare, known as the dream catcher. And it's been around in this camp for a while. And it is such a terrifying urban legend because it's said that this entity has caused some previous campers to get insomnia and actually drop dead. Yes, drop dead due to lack of sleep. So this is a horrifying urban legend. The idea that some of these girls will not be able to sleep, they will have their nightmares plagued. And what do you know? What ends up happening is that these dream catchers are put in as a sort of protective magic, a ward away to kind of keep away the enemy. But because of some of the hostile relations that the main character has with some girls, which is none of her fault, it is just due to their personalities and past experiences, she gets her dream catcher sabotaged. Actually gets that little spider on the neck cut off. And what do you know? The big funnel web trapdoor spider, known as the dream catcher, spins his thread and starts crawling into her nightmares. She has trouble sleeping, and she has to find a way to either survive this camping trip, which very small chances, or get to the bottom of this urban legend, find out what she has to do, which may be recruiting the help of the other girls and getting to a cave and trying to figure out how to deal with this thing. And, minor spoiler alert, is not exactly solving. It's more so trying to buy time because the Dreamcatcher is the most terrifying villain in all of Haunting Hour and all of kids horror. This is a Freddy Krueger entity. All right, it is terrifying. It looks like Marilyn Manson and all of his makeup as a giant spider. These four long legs. The idea that it's got one dead eye, one piercing eye, these sharp teeth, and it haunts your nightmares. And the idea that there are innocent girls who are being given insomnia, being given sleep paralysis, night terrors, to the point that they've dropped dead in the past just because of one haunting entity. It is horrifying. There's even a scene where they start, singing tunes, and it's like a half nightmare, half like reality sequence where, this girl is trying not to doze off because the moment that you doze off, that funnel web spider called Dreamcatcher is going to pop up, and she's just hallucinating that, there's this cult. All the girls are secretly planning against her, and the Dreamcatcher just has them all as members of his cult. It is so horrifying. It is so scary. The scene when they actually get to the cave and explore it is horrifying. Again, like entering the den of a spider. And one of my favorite lines in all of kids' horror by any villain is at the end of this episode, where a certain girl is trapped in the web and the dream catcher is literally pouncing up to her, and she's like convincing herself that you're not real, I'm awake. And the dream catcher just has to say one thing: if you were awake, I wouldn't be here. And she lets out a blood curdling scream, and that's where the episode ends. So, yeah, this is truly a scary episode. And it's nightmare fuel for a lot of people, a lot of grown men and women who grew up watching this episode. I bet you that if you saw this thing on TV or you saw this thing on YouTube, either you looked away from the screen or you had to fast forward on your little, YouTube clicker, being like, yeah, I'm not going to get jump scared by this guy, especially if you rewatched it. So, great episode.
Yeah, I have a funny story with Dreamcatcher. I was in high school when this episode dropped, and at the time I was watching every Haunting Hour episode, or I was like at the night it would air, or I was DVRing it. And I remember me and my brother, we saw the promo for this episode, and we're like, oh, we gotta watch this one because we saw a snippet of that the villain. So we sat down, and I remember my brother was clenching his pillow like this, and he was shaking. He was young at the time, maybe like 10 or 11 years old. I was in high school, and I just remember just being in awe that they went there with this episode, over the top, but in the greatest way possible, with the monster effects, with the tone just being merciless, with a villain straight up trying to kill kids. Like, there's no sugarcoating it. He's gonna kill you if he has his way with you. The girls, being targeted at all girls camp. At the time I was like, okay, well, maybe they're borrowing some stuff from, some 80s movies, like some Friday the 13th in here. Clearly, at the time, I also thought it was very Freddy Krueger like, but it was almost like, to me, what appealed to me the most is like, this feels like the Jeepers Creepers creep meets Freddy Krueger, man. Just throw a spider motif on it. Because the Jeepers Creepers villain, if you've never seen that movie, has a den of his own, and he keeps his victims. What would have set this episode over the top? And I'm not saying it didn't exist, but it's heavily implied that there could be like a cavernous wall of these victims in his little spider den, which is insane. The fact they went there with this episode. Yeah, I wanted to be a fly on the wall. At the time, and still to this day, I want to be a fly on the wall to whoever wrote this episode or came up with the idea for it, and how they went about pitching this, because the fact that they were able to do it still to this day, just I don't even think a modern show would do this. Like, I don't think they would risk the parent backlash that it probably would get, especially with parents these days. Not saying anything that's necessarily wrong with parents these days, but I think, when we were growing up, it was a little bit more laid back. This was, the late 2000s, y'all, so it was kind of edgy, even for kids horror. Just remember that. That was the trend. But yeah, I used to say that Dreamcatcher was my all-time favorite kids horror episode. I can't quite say it's perfect, but if we were talking about the scariest, I will 100% always say it's still the scariest, or one of the scariest.
It is also crazy that they dealt with the controversy of Dead Body and the controversy of Scarecrow, and they're still like, nope, we're gonna make Dreamcatcher. We're not holding back. We're still gonna go all the way. So, commendos to them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I still think that if you've seen the episode or if you haven't watched it yet and you decide to go watch it, you will see that the editing is kind of chopped in some places, where it clearly is evident that there was some stuff in there that they axed out. I don't know if it was because of the controversy of Scarecrow coming out right before this episode aired, and maybe they went and changed some stuff last minute. I would believe that if that was the case, but the fact that they still allowed this episode to air is still commendable on that front. Micah, did you want to contribute to Dreamcatcher here?
Yeah, I think this is definitely like by far the scariest Haunting Hour episode in terms of the tone, kind of like right alongside Pumpkinhead. They're just both the most like atmospheric and the most dread-inducing episodes. I feel like, just again, like, as you guys have mentioned, the Dreamcatcher's design is absolutely horrifying. Like even for adult horror standards, it is horrifying. And it's like the fact that they got away with that in a kids horror show impresses me to no end. And I just think that the way they like, again, despite some of the messy editing and sometimes a couple story messes here and there, like the horror in this episode, I think like saves the episode from mediocrity, and actually I think overshadows the bad or the negative parts of the episode and actually makes it still a very good episode despite its flaws. Mm-hmm. And I just think that, yeah, the horror in this show or episode is so well done. Like the scene that always gets to me is when the girls are sleeping in the cabin and you just see like the Dreamcatcher's like spider like fingers just like curl over the edge of the bed. That's just such like a chilling moment. And again, of course, like, or like the scene where she encounters him in the bathroom stalls is also a really intense moment. And I just like, and of course the whole ending scene is just so dark. And again, it's like Haunting Hour again, not being afraid to kill off kids, even if the death isn't necessarily on screen. It's very heavily implied. And it's just one of those things versus like, again, you got to give kudos to the Haunting Hour team for being willing to go as far as they did and actually give kids a horror experience that will actually scare them and actually, you know, give them the scares that I feel like a lot of these kids and teenagers want going into these shows.
Mm-hmm. The funniest thing about Dreamcatcher 2 is like obviously it's a fan favorite because it's the scariest, but you know, and I can kind of understand why this second aspect is not always like brought up in conversation, but the fact that it's a camp book too, like the fact that it has to deal with camping. I mean, I get it, you know, compared to other camping ones, you know, the situation and the other extracurricular activities are not as much, but everyone talks about Camp Nightmare, everyone talks about the big ones, but guys, don't forget Dreamcatcher is a camp book, all right, a camp kids horror story, and arguably it's the scariest. I mean, it is just horrifying, and the camping serves a purpose. You know, it's not just there to be like, hey, we're going to show you guys, you know, all these different extracurricular activities. No, it's there to show you that these girls are isolated. You know, there's no adults, there's no one who's going to come save you, and literally even the few, you know, camp counselors and people here are no, you know, subject to being away from the influence of the Dreamcatcher. So it's a great premise for a story.
And it's one of the few examples. I mean, I kind of touched on it with Scary Mary, where like in that story, the hero gets the bad ending, right, for doing the right thing. Here, the moral of Dreamcatcher, I think, is probably one of the best morals Arl Stein's Haunting Hour ever had as a show, where you see this. What ends up happening to the character in question. They put themselves in that situation because of their vindictive side. They put themselves in that situation because they wanted to be malicious and because they didn't want to be friends with the people they probably should have been friends with. Because if they were, she would have been saved by what ends up possibly saving them. So it makes you think like, don't be that person. Don't be that asshole because you're going to be left by yourself and nobody to help you. Quite literally in this case. And that's where it ends up happening to her. So it's a good message for kids.
Mm-hmm. As I say, karma's a bitch.
Yep, it is. That's a tough lesson for a kid to learn. But if you watch Dreamcatcher, you're going to learn real quick.
Mm-hmm. Compared to other kids' horror stories too, like most of the time when you like see a kids' horror story episode or book, it's always about conquering the villain. Dreamcatcher is like one of the few that literally was all about surviving. It's not about defeating this thing. It's about surviving and outsmarting long enough. You know what this episode basically is, and it's a good lesson because again, it's a camp, story. It's when you run into a bear, I don't have to run faster than the bear. I just have to outrun you. And if I outrun you, I get away from the bear. That's the dream catcher. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to beat the dream catcher. They just had to set somebody up to be a little bit of bait. And that's what it is.
Yep. It's like, and even if they wanted to try to defeat this monster, they would need like a two-parter to even try to
Oh
attempt
yeah.
that because of the runtime. But this is the episode from Haunting Hour that I think got snubbed the hardest from a two-parter. Uh, like
Mhm.
if there was any that could have used that time, I would have given it to Dreamcatcher because I was I'm still to this day fascinated by that 22 minutes that we had with this story about like the possibilities of what it could have been if it had a much more grander story with it. And
And
they
and we need that uncut version. We at least need to see like the original screenplay or like some of this stuff because I'm so curious, especially with some Mandela effect involving TV promo showing some stuff that I did not see in the episode. I'm like, there has to be stuff cut out that we could probably see in like a bloopers or something.
yeah, I would love to see the director's cut of this. Um, I wouldn't be shocked if it's out there. The thing is like Haunting Hours never got a box set release. Man, oh man, how awesome that would be if we got an official one all these years later, and they were like, you know what, we're gonna give the fans what they wanted. We're gonna give you those alternate ending Spaceman and Scarecrows, but we're also gonna give you some episodes that had some director's cuts because of ratings we had to worry about. Dreamcatcher, there you go. You finally get your fully realized vision there.
We got guys like King Newsman and other influencers bringing back a lot of Haunting Hour popularity. So who knows? Maybe if there's enough craze, they'll be like, you know what, guys, here you go. We'll give it to you. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, never say never. Never say never. I'm always holding out hope. Yeah, maybe one day we'll get the Goosebumps one too.
Hopefully,
Hopefully.
hope someday. What they need to do is then collaborate with Goosebumps crew to get a couple of their interviews, their podcast episodes, as special features or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just influencers just need to get them pumping. That's all.
Yep.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was our list of the scariest kids horror episodes plus some honorable mentions. For tonight's discussion, before we close out, we thought we would have a little fun discussion of we're talking about we've been talking about stories that were written for these shows, stories that were adapted. This is more focused on the idea of like stories written for a show in mind, ideas for kids horror episodes we want to see, right? And there's so many different variables out there of how to go about making kids horror episodes, budget being the biggest one and the biggest hurdle. um Maybe technology capabilities depending on the time period we're looking at, type, and maybe even what specific show. That's not really the basis of the discussion, but that can be a factor if you wanted to go that route. Like, what show would you want to see this idea in? That's fine. But the idea is just like an idea that would have probably been really cool to see written for a kids horror show, or if there's a new show coming out that wants to look for some ideas, and some homegrown writers writing treatments for the show need some ideas. These are some fun ideas that they can try if they want it, right? So I guess whoever wants to take this first, let's start spitballing some ideas that you think would be fun to see in a kids horror show.
I guess I can go. So I have like a couple ideas. I mean, obviously, budget is the biggest thing, right? How much can you do with your budget? How much can factor in? My picks are kind of taking that into mind. There's a bunch of crazy monsters and ideas that you see in adult horror and books and stuff that you can get away with. But if you had an anthology show, you have to factor it in. One of the things that I see all the time in adult horror that has almost never been utilized in kids' horror, minus one time, and it was a really bad example, is Native American folklore. You will see Native American folklore used in everything, and I mean everything horror, especially a lot of westerns and pulpy stuff. The Tale of the Manawa from Are You Afraid the Dark tried it, and it is such a shitty episode. It is so bad and so insulting, so really underutilized. I think that from Native American folklore, maybe do an episode with the Skinwalker. Skinwalker is a Native American urban legend that I've always been fascinated since I was a kid. I remember seeing a Lost Tapes episode involving a Skinwalker, where, for those of you unfamiliar, Skinwalkers in Native American folklore are effectively witches. They're effectively these old hags, these old witches, witchcraft users, who dress up in, animal skins and pelts. And they basically gain the ability through black magic to shapeshift, to turn into creatures, which set the foundation for werewolves, were coyotes, stuff like that. Depending on the skin of the witch and the sorcerer, they can turn into these type of creatures. So I think it'd be really cool to have a threat that can basically combine a really creepy looking old lady and witch with good werewolf effects and stuff. It could be really cool. You can bring in Native American urban legend. You basically get two villains for the price of one, while at the same time having a novel idea. And that's effectively for that. And of course, you can do a lot of things. In my head, I imagine that, let's say if the main character teams up with, this witch might have a daughter and they team up to go against the mom. You might get like a werewolf skin book type of ending where at the end she turns to face the daughter, and she finds out that the sins of the mother did pass to the daughter. She can transform into a wolf, stuff like that. And the second option I would do is we've seen some cryptid stuff getting more popular. Honestly, Mothman. I think Mothman would be really cool to do. I have heard a lot of creepy stories involving Mothman, about people on road trips, people flying at night and dealing with it. Its huge red eyes, the fear that it invokes, the trance. I think Mothman you could do practical effects for, you could do a costume for, and you could use low lighting so you can kind of reduce if you have any bad CGI just by keeping it dark, keeping it very scary. So those would be my picks. I think they'd be cool to do.
Yeah, I'm all aboard on the Mothman idea because that story has fascinated me ever since I was a little kid. I grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries, and they did a segment in like the early 2000s on it. And then in the recent iteration of the show, they did like a follow up to Mothman, which is also equally fascinating. I also really love the Mothman Prophecies movie. Have you ever seen that?
I have not.
No, man, you need to check it out. It's really fascinating. But I think it's the town is what, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Set in the 1950s. That's such a fascinating thing to build a story on. Stein recently came out with One Night at Camp Bigfoot. So we have some cryptid stories out there. You'd be shocked. There's not really that much cryptid stories out there. So a show tackling something like Mothman, or maybe like a knockoff to Mothman, but with similar lore, would be awesome. Um, and I'm with you on the Native American lore theme stories. With like Skinwalkers is a good example. Um, I wouldn't mind a story like that. You know, but the biggest thing for me would be like, people. It depends on the person writing if they have like the taste for it. You know what I mean? I don't want to get to like specifics about what I'm referring to when I say that, but like, you know what I mean? Like the taste, right? You got to make sure that you're
Show
not
respect to the
offending
culture.
people. You can't offend people. So yeah, great choices. Micah, I guess you're up next, unless you want to add anything to Shiv's recommendations.
Not really to add, no. I think he has a lot
All
of
right.
good ideas right there. So I
All
think,
right.
yeah, Native American folklore, definitely some interesting stuff you could go more into. Even like, I don't know, even like the Wendigo. Like, you don't really see much Wendigo stuff in kids' horror, at least. So, like, there's just a lot of possibilities. And for me, like, for my picks, going again back into the folklore or legends route, where I'm going overseas to Japan. Because, in my opinion, Japan has some of the best horror urban legends, in my personal opinion. And there's a lot of them that could be really interesting to lean into as like a kids horror setting. Like, probably I would say like Haunting Hour would probably be the best place to put them, because Haunting Hour does more of that kind of urban legend stuff, like with Scary Mary. And a couple of the ones I have, one is again, I'm not going to try to pronounce the Japanese names of some of these, because I know I'm going to butcher it, but one of them is the 8 foot tall woman. And it's this urban legend of this woman who is like, again, this like creepy woman who's like in a white funeral shroud, who stands at 8 feet tall and just keeps like muttering this word, just pull, over and over again in a deep man's voice. And basically, the whole thing is like she goes around and abducts children and kind of lures them in, usually like appearing as a family member or someone they trust to lure them in, and then she kidnaps them and presumably kills them. And so I feel like it'd be kind of interesting to play around with that. Like maybe, like if, for example, like for all of these, you can kind of have the setup be like the kid goes to visit a relative in Japan, and then they have an encounter. They hear about this urban legend of like the 8 foot tall woman or other ones that I'll get into in a bit, and then they end up, encountering them and having to figure out how to stop it. So I think that's one of them. One other one that I actually thought would be kind of interesting is called the long-necked woman, where basically is this urban legend of women in Japan who apparently like these. I think it's some kind of supposed curse that plagues certain women, where at night their necks suddenly will like stretch and like grow abnormally long, and basically like they kind of just float around and scare people and like cause harm and things like that. It's just, I don't know. It's a really weird kind of urban legend, but I feel like if you did that in a certain way, I'm not sure how they could pull it out budget wise, but it would be a really creepy visual, especially for like a kid's horror medium, to just have like this woman with like this really long extending neck. And then I think the other one that like kind of the most interesting and almost delve more into psychological horror is called the Kune Kune, which is this like creature that's just seen in the middle of cornfields. And it's basically this paper thin, white, almost like I always kind of like to compare it to those like balloon inflatable things you see at car dealerships. And they're basically like, yeah, these like white, almost like sheet looking things that just stand in the middle of cornfields and just like shimmy around and sway in the breeze. And it said that looking directly at them will cause insanity. So I feel like there could be something interesting along there where like some kids, again, like go to Japan and they hear about this urban legend. And then as their trip goes on, they continue to get stalked by this Kune Kune creature, and they have to figure out how to avoid it. I don't know, something like that. I haven't really thought about plot wise, but I feel like those urban legends would be really interesting. And there's tons of other Japanese urban legends that'd be really interesting to see how they could be adapted into a kid's horror medium. Those are just the 3 that really stood out to me.
Okay. Yeah, Japanese. I was gonna say Japanese folklore. I think the biggest benefit to it is a lot of it is made to scare kids. If you often read a lot of their urban legends, the one that I always thought is cool for kids horror is the Kappa, and I always remember the Kappa because there was a episode of River Monsters on Animal Planet where the main guy who runs it went to Japan, and there's a shrine where they kept a picture depiction of the Kappa, and it looks like a gremlin. It's got like a turtle shell on its head. It looks like a really creepy gremlin. And the urban legend is that any kids who go by streams, this thing will basically reach out and try to drown them, take them under the water. And I think it's inspired because in Japan they have giant salamanders that are in the water, so it's time to scare kids. So yeah, it's a good place to get some inspiration.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for like more specifics on, because you went heavy on the urban legend influence there, Micah. Did you want like actual adaptations of these urban legends, or like something loosely based on the urban legends?
I'm thinking more loosely based, kind of like what they do with Scary Mary, for example. I feel like it's taking those urban legends and then adding their own twist onto it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, because there's a lot of legends out there. I mean, that's like basically like, free reign right there. In fact, they took one of the most well-known ones and made something cool out of it in Haunting Hour. Is just the proof in the pudding that you can.
They also had a second one, which was the Weeping Woman, the Curse of La Llorona. So.
Oh yeah,
La Llorona, yeah,
that's right.
They did. Yeah, I want to doubt that the same writer wrote both of those episodes. I don't know if that's a fact, but it just seems like somebody was like writing for that show, like, there's some urban legends we can write here.
And you have bad feng shui, which is the idea of Chinese feng shui leading to demons, malevolent spirits coming in your house. So.
Mm-hmm. I always thought, thinking on it, I do have 2 ideas here. One is like basically a movie, but for kids. But one that comes to mind now, one of my favorite urban legends is it's a variation of a popular legend about the killer in the back seat, right? But in this variation, there's some versions out there where the ghost of the killer's previous victim is following this girl on this road trip in the night, which freaks her out, and she thinks that that's the killer, keeps appearing to kill her, but it's the injured guy in her back seat that's her real threat. And she ends up getting saved because of the spirit of the Good Samaritan. I always thought would be a fun idea for a story would be kind of like a road trip horror, where like families in like an RV, but like there's obviously people on the run, Mad Max style, like following them the whole way there. And since you're on the go and there's really nowhere to stop, you kind of actually have to deal with the threat then and there, or you're forced to stop, right? So creating an episode where literally you're on the move the whole time, and I want to say car chase kind of thing, but like you can do that route, like actually go like thriller with it a little bit, and go into that route and try something different. Because have you ever seen a kids horror episode with a car chase, like families being chased by somebody in a vehicle coming after them? No, it could be something wild. I don't care. They could be monster focused. It could be like human based. I don't know, just something there to invoke like, hey, they're stuck in this whatever they're driving an RV or whatever. Deal with the threat then on. I think that'd be kind of cool. Um, I don't think it would be too much on the budget unless you're trying to explode some cars or something for some dramatic effect. But something simple like that, kind of coincides with the Mothman legend. What could be a
I
cool
was just
thing?
gonna say Mothman because a lot of the
Yeah,
scenes are cars getting chased.
yeah. They chase the cars, or like the Jersey Devil, for example. That's another popular cryptid. Likes to chase cars. There you go. That would be really cool. But really, my pick was going to be a very famous John Carpenter movie. And this is the reason why I want to see it get made. I am taking it into account, budget and whatnot. But these days, I mean, you can create AI for all you care for this if you wanted to create some effect, I guess, or just put it CGI. It's a snow story. Like I want more snow stories. We get, or maybe even a beach story. Once, mine is Deep Trouble. I can't tell you a kid's horror story that takes place on a beach, right? Do some aquatic horror too. But my pick is snow based, and it's alien based. Basically, make the thing for kids. My idea would be something simple. They're up at a ski resort or a cabin lodge out there in the mountains. A UFO, you commonly hear about UFO sightings in the mountains. UFO crash lands, but it's a shape shifting alien, right? And maybe an assimilating alien that likes to absorb kids into a conglomerate. I'm not saying go full blown like James Gunn Slither with it, or John Carpenter's The Thing, but something to that effect, right? Monster Blood, the more Monster Blood episode from Goosebumps had Monster Blood assimilate kids in a modern setting with a new show, right? Um, you can push the envelope, I think. Actually shows some some kids getting absorbed and assimilated. Of course I want to see them completely dead, but you can go dark with that if you want. Pull the twist out of the thing's ending. If you've never seen the thing, I don't want to spoil it for you, but the whole premise is whatever survivors are left, there's a thing still in the mix. So which one is it? All right, keep that twist. There you go. That's all you really need. That's all you really need to make a compelling story. Or unless they want to do the whole like, let's save the day and kill the monster, right? They can reverse the effects to not make it as dark, but maybe somebody still has some lingering effects. I don't care. But I just think that in that snowy, isolated setting, it will make it pop. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, no, I love the Snowden setting. I wish we got more of that too, because even there's a new Eek book by Jeff Strand coming out dealing with kids Snowden, and there's like Sasquatches and stuff, so it's out there. Also, I'm pissed because even in one of my favorite adult horror authors, Tim Curran, I got mad he never made this into like a separate book. It was a complete throwaway line and flashback in another book where a character talks about how they used to grow up in New York, and as kids, him and his friends used to go to upstate New York where it's like snowy and forest, and they got snowed in. And there used to be snow ghosts, basically ghosts of people who got lost out in blizzards that basically stalked their cabin. And any kids who go out there would get buried under the snow alive. And it was a throwaway line, just a throwaway line in flashback in one of his books. And I'm like, you could have made that into a whole story in itself, but it's again that Snowden setting. So you know
Yeah. After seeing Bigfoot Bridge from Are You Afraid of the Dark, I just feel so snubbed that we never got one in Goosebumps.
that one too.
Mhm.
Again, it's like an honorary kids horror thing. That's like one of the few that did that.
You know, it's never too late. If Goosebumps comes back in a show, they can always try to adapt that double dip horror story and do The Shining for kids.
Double
You
dip
That's
know,
horror.
true.
yeah,
Okay.
Or if you want to get another snow-based story, not even ski lodge, not ski lodge, but snow-based stories, Beware the Snowman.
yeah. And I guess the last honorable mention would be that more aquatic stories. I want more aquatic
Oh
ones.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. The only problem is budget, which is like the biggest thing. Is anytime it's aquatic horror, it's like, oh, the budget's gonna kick in. I did think though that the one that they could probably do within budget that I remember seeing in a Dead Bait story that I read was the story about sirens. I've always wondered about sirens because even Creepshow made a segment about sirens in one of its later seasons. So I'm like, maybe kids dealing with sirens out at sea. People get lost out there and they get lured, and you can have children, sirens, you can have all these crazy things. So, food for thought.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy ideas like the tale. What is it called? The tale of C7 with the Evil Dead editing. They could do Evil
Yeah,
Dead for kids.
and you had
That
water,
actually would probably be easy.
and you had water demons. Water demons is one
Water
of the most
demons. Yeah.
famous. So
Actually, just combine C7 and Water Demons. There you go. Combine both of those ideas and just make it into an episode.
there you go. People get lured in the water by sirens, get turned into water ghost.
Yeah,
There
they're
you
water
go.
demons. They get lured into the water, but only if they only come alive if the person they're after is sleeping. So
Yeah,
that's and they come at you like you see the Evil Dead editing coming at you. That would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
yeah. And instead of being like that thing where in the siren urban legend you gotta harm yourself or you gotta cut out your ears to cut out the music. Just have a kid on like an MP3 or just blasting music trying to deal with these things. Just make it fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, that was our episode 44 of Goosejunkies, everyone. As per usual, I will have all of our links down in the description of this video and down in the comments section as well. Because YouTube now allows co-authoring, you will also be able to find this video on Ultimate Goosebumps Man's channel and on the Horrorlanders channel as co-authors of this podcast. We're going to be doing a lot. I still need to set aside some time, but we're going to try slowly but surely getting all of our backlog of this podcast switched over to that format so you can catch all episodes on there too, so they get some credit and view credit for that, as they deserve, because they have basically been here. I know at least Horrorlander's been here along with me since the first episode. So yeah, um, long time coming on that. If you're not subscribed to the Ultimate Goosebumps Man and the Horrorlander, please take some time to do so if you haven't done so before. Free way to support this podcast, of course, is to drop a like. And if you want to, and this comes from a big portion of my heart that is very gracious for those that have done this, and I have seen it. So I know it is being done. If you decide to share this video, that is much appreciated as well. If you want to check out other Goosejunkies podcasts we have done in the past, there's an entire playlist on my channel here where you can hit the notification bell to get notified anytime that we upload a podcast. You will have it ready to go. And if you're first time viewers or checking in our podcast for the first time, feel free to start somewhere that catches your attention, something that you recognize, and just go from there. We do a wide variety of stuff on this podcast. This episode is definitely an atypical thing that we usually do, but this has been a long time coming and a topic we've been wanting to talk about. So for episode 45, moving forward into the next one a little bit to give you a quick teaser of what to expect, there's going to be a duology to this. When there's a yin, there's a yang. Right? We talked about the 5 scariest kids' horror episodes. So we should talk about I guess, the 5 cringiest kids horror episodes. But there's going to be a twist. There's going to be a twist. We're not going to pick the ones that everybody likes to dunk on all the time. We're going to pick the ones that you forgot existed. Right? So these are going to be the 5 cringiest kids horror episodes you forgot existed. So stay tuned for that. These episodes are all going to be terrible. So if you already have some ideas that you want to bring to the table out there in the comment section, please let us know. We might consider it. Who knows? You know, we haven't really solidified the list yet, but once it is, we'll get on and make that episode for you all. Is there any closing remarks before we head out, guys?
Are you afraid of the dark, fans? We are sorry, because if you were upset that you only got one entry in the scariest, you might get a couple in the next one. So be prepared.
Oh boy, it's gonna be a bumpy. It's gonna be a bumpy video for that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, just we're gonna continue to make Are You Afraid of the Dark fans mad at us. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's tradition. It wouldn't be without it.
Yeah. All right. Until next time, everyone, take care and stay spooky.